Welcome back to another edition of Barbara and Haskell's Kitchen. My name is Amanda. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my sourdough recipe. I've been trying a lot of different ways. I've been working on it since February. This just happens to be the way that works the best for me, the recipe I like. It yields the best results, but that doesn't mean that it'll be perfect for you. I invite you to try this recipe, try some tweaks, and see what works best for you. So I just want to go over some of the things you're going to need. If you want to make sourdough, first and foremost, you're going to need a starter. I do have a video which I will link on how to make a starter. You're also going to need a second glass jar as well so you can make your leaven. You're going to need a Dutch oven. You can get these locally. They're super affordable if you look for deals. I think I got this one for $40 if you don't have one. You're going to need a proofing basket. Unfortunately, I couldn't find this locally, but I did find one for about $10 online. Super affordable, highly recommend. You're also gonna need a bowl of some sort. I like to use a clear glass one. You're going to need a Pyrex dish. This one just happens to have some proofing dough in it. You're also gonna need a kitchen scale and some flour. I like to use whole wheat and all-purpose. For me, I really like the Miller's Pride. You can find it local, and it tends to build up a good amount of gluten in the bread. So there are tons more items that you can purchase when you want to make sourdough. You could get a scraper for the counter. You can get things to cut your bread. You can buy fancy dishes. It goes on and on and on. Here's some of the basics that I like. So first things first, I'm going to move this away, and then I'll come back and I will tell you how we start making this recipe. All right, all of that stuff's put away. This is how I start making my recipe. Last night I fed my starter, and then when I wake up in the morning, I'm gonna make my leaven. And that basically is just equal parts starter, equal parts filtered water, and equal parts flour. Depending on how many loaves you're gonna make, you'll vary this. Today we're gonna make one loaf, so I'm gonna mix 50 grams of starter, 50 grams of filtered water, and 50 grams of flour into this glass jar, and we're gonna set it aside until it about doubles in volume. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this now. I'm gonna grab my kitchen scale to weigh these. Super important that you're accurate with this recipe. All right, now that this is completely mixed together, you want to make sure it's mixed together really, really well. You're gonna mark either with a dry erase marker or something on the side of your dish. You can even use a hair elastic on the side just to show where it is now. You're gonna wanna come back to this, and our next step is gonna start once your leaven has doubled in size. Now that this is done, you should also take this time to feed your starter again. And I usually feed it with 30 grams of flour, 30 grams of water, and just set that aside for the rest of the day. And I will see you for the next step. All right, so as you can see here, our leaven has almost doubled, if not doubled completely. And we are gonna move on to the stage where we mix the water and the flour together. So we have 100 grams of whole wheat and 400 grams of all-purpose. I use the Miller's Pride. You wanna make sure when you're using an all-purpose flour that it has no bleach. The sourdough starter is a living organism, and if you use bleach in it, it will actually kill the bacteria, which is going to help your bread rise. So make sure when you're using all-purpose that you pick something that does not have bleach in it. I like to add a little bit of whole wheat. It just makes the gluten a little bit stronger. And we're also going to use filtered water. I have 375 grams here, which I'm going to mix into my flour. And you're just going to want to barely incorporate it. You want to make sure there's no lumps, but you don't want it to look completely put together either. Now, I always like to have a little bit of water on hand. I find that I need a little bit more just to drip around the edges to make sure that the flour is fully incorporated. And you don't have to use a glass bowl. I just like to be able to see what's going on with my flour and water. All right, so it is put together but still a little bit shaggy. You want to make sure it's completely incorporated, otherwise you're going to find lumps later on in your dough. So now that this is ready, we're just going to cover it with saran wrap and put it aside for 1 hour. And then we're going to come back and we're going to add 100 grams of our leaven. Okay, so our flour and water has sat for 1 hour covered in saran. So now we're just going to add 100 grams of our leaven. And you're just going to want to zero out your scale and put 100 grams. All right, now that we have 100 grams of our leaven in, we're just gonna claw at it, kind of best way to describe it. Just kind of mix it together. So that it goes all the way through. Once you've kind of done that, we're actually gonna go underneath and pull towards us. Underneath and pull towards us while we spin the bowl. And as we're doing this, we're gonna pull up and pull towards us. We're gonna do this 50 times. And you're just gonna see the dough sort of kind of start to come together. It's gonna look a little bit more like a ball of dough as we do this. So we're just gonna do this 50 times as we turn the bowl. All right, so as you can see, it's sort of put together now. And the best way to describe it is you want to pull up on the dough and kind of pull it towards you as you're turning the bowl. And that's just gonna help kind of create some of the strength in the gluten. So now I'm just gonna cover this back up for 30 minutes, and then we're gonna come back and add in our salt. All right, it's been 30 minutes and we're gonna add our salt. We're gonna add 20 grams of salt. And then we're literally gonna do exactly what we did last time. We're just gonna mix it in to our dough, and then we're gonna pull it up and away, do this 50 times. I like to have my hand a little bit wet during this process because it will help the dough from not sticking to your hand. So we're just gonna do this 50 times, get it nice and incorporated. All right, and now I'm gonna take this, and you don't have to put it into one of these dishes, but I like to transfer it over into a clear glass dish like this. It's square, and it's really just gonna help with the next phase that we're gonna move into, which is gonna require some folding. Like I said, you don't have to. It makes it a little bit easier, and the glass dish really helps you see whether your dough is rising. At the end of this, you're gonna want your dough to have doubled in size. So I'm just gonna cover this again, and we're gonna come back and we're gonna work the dough every 30 minutes until you kind of see it start to have the gluten forming, and I'll show you what that looks like. So we're gonna put this aside for 30 minutes and we'll come back and I'll show you how to do the folding technique. All right, it has been another 30 minutes. We're just gonna take the plastic wrap off of this, and I'm gonna show you how to do the folds. So what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna go underneath your dough, really close to the edge, and you're just gonna fold it underneath itself, and you're just gonna keep doing that. And then you're gonna spin it around, and you're gonna do the same thing on the other side. Then you're gonna do a 90-degree spin, and you're gonna fold it once under and once under again, and that's called a coil fold. You're gonna do this 3 to 6 times until you start to see your dough come together. You'll start to notice that in between your 30 minutes, the dough actually keeps its shape, and that's how you know that you're done doing the coil folds. So today I will probably do 3 to 4, and I'll show you what the final fold looks like. Again, you're gonna do these every 30 minutes until you really start to see the gluten build up in your bread, and that's what's gonna give your bread that nice structure. All right, so I'm back. I'm on my 4th round of coil folds, and I just wanna show you the difference between round 1 and round 2. A lot of gluten is built up in the bread, so when I do this, there's not as much give as there was before. You see how there's barely any give to the bread? That's how you know that you're ready to let your bread go into bulk fermentation. So I'm just gonna wrap this up and we're gonna let it sit for about an hour to 2 hours. You're gonna want it to be about double in size compared to what it was when you first started. And that's how you know that you're ready to dump your dough out and start doing a pre-shape. All right, so our dough has now doubled in size, and I'm just gonna pour it out onto a lightly floured surface. As you can see, it came out pretty easily from our dish. So for this step, you're gonna wanna make sure that your hands have a little bit of flour on them because your dough is gonna be a little bit sticky, as you can see. And for this step, you're just basically going to wanna pre-shape it into a ball. And by doing, basically what I'm doing is tucking some of the dough underneath of itself, and it's creating surface tension on top of our dough. Now you can see it's a nice round shape. Our proofing basket is for a bowl, so it's going to be round. And what I'm gonna do is just put out a little bit more flour over here, and I'm gonna set it to rest. And so now that we have it pre-shaped, we're gonna let it sit to rest for another 45 minutes. All right, so our dough has rested for 45 minutes. As you can see, it has a bit of a skin on it. So with our floured hands, we're just gonna pick it up and flip it over. And now it's a lot easier to work with the dough because the skin on the back isn't sticky. And so we're just gonna fold it up like so. And again, we're just gonna give it a quick little shaping so it looks more like a ball. And now you have a nicely shaped sourdough. We're just gonna flip it into our proofing basket, lightly cover it with some saran, not very tight. I like to leave the sides out. And then we're gonna pop this in the fridge for 12 to 16 hours. And then we'll preheat the oven to 460 degrees for 1 hour. All right, we are back. Our oven has preheated for 1 hour with our Dutch oven inside of it. You wanna make sure your Dutch oven is super hot before you put the bread in. And then I'm gonna show you how to prepare the dough to go into your Dutch oven. I like to spritz a bit of water on my parchment paper. You're gonna need some parchment. This is just gonna help you get it out of the Dutch oven and kind of help your dough from burning. So I like to spritz it with a little bit of water, and you're just gonna dump your bread out. And I don't have one of the fancy scoring things, so I just use a bread knife. And I go in on an angle and just cut it like that. You're gonna wanna get fairly like deeper than you think. Kind of like that. And so now I'm just gonna set this into the Dutch oven. We're gonna cook it for 25 minutes inside of the Dutch oven. Then I'm gonna pull it out and we're gonna cook it for 25 minutes outside of the Dutch oven. And then we're gonna turn the oven completely off and let it sit with the door ajar for 10 minutes. And I'll give you a little preview of what my oven setup looks like, just because that was something I had to fiddle with probably the most in order to get the bread to turn out how I wanted. So right now we're gonna throw this into the oven and I'll be back to show you my oven setup. All right, so here's how I set up my oven for when I make sourdough. I have my Dutch oven about halfway down my oven, and directly underneath it, I actually have a baking sheet on a rack. I found when I was originally making sourdough, the bottoms were getting burnt, and to combat that, putting a baking sheet underneath has completely eliminated that. So this is how I set up my oven when I make sourdough. I highly recommend you try this method and let me know if it works for you. All right, so our bread has finished cooking and here is the final result. You're gonna wanna let this cool for probably an hour to an hour and a half. You want it to cool completely before you cut into it, which is so hard, but you absolutely must do it for the bread to finish cooking properly. Once it's done, you can cut into it and it should look like this if you followed all of the steps. Sourdough making is really about taking cues from your dough and your starter. Has it doubled in size? Does it feel like the gluten has built up enough? And once you've made it a few times, you'll really start to understand the dough. I highly recommend you try the recipe as I prescribed it. And then once you see how things are working with your bread, make slight little adjustments based on the temperature of your house. If it's warmer, things will go a little bit quicker. If your house is a little bit cooler, it could go a little bit slower. If you do try my recipe, I would absolutely love it if you would tag Barbara and Haskell so we can see your sourdough. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.